Will full synthetic oil cause a vehicle with high miles to develop leaks? Is the question that I want to ask in today's vehicle. So this engine, we switched over to full synthetic oil. It has 219,000 miles, and we put full synthetic in it. We ran it for a couple of hundred miles, and we're gonna see exactly how much oil's been leaking, if there's any leaks developed at all. We're going to take a look here at the engine. Looking at the left-hand valve cover, I can't really detect any signs of leakage. It still seems to be pretty dry. There's no drips underneath the vehicle, and looks like there's no oil leaking down there on the exhaust. I haven't smelt any oil burning while the engine's running. And let's go ahead and pull the dipstick. This engine hasn't been started for today, but go ahead and pull the dipstick out. And oil's nice and full. No oil's being consumed. It looks kind of high on the stick because I did pull the stick out, but when I initially pulled the stick out, it was right there at the first fill bubble. Now the oil is getting, or it is staying cleaner longer. Initially the oil was clean when I bought it. I put a couple hundred miles on it. Oil was dark within the first drive home. Drive home was like 70 miles, and the oil got dark just in 70 miles, and it was kind of burning off. I would check it, it'd be a little low. Switching to full synthetic, I feel like there's less burn off, and there's no metal that I can see in the oil. Before, I was finding a little bit of metal in the oil, just like one speck, one or two little pieces. Nothing crazy, nothing that I really didn't know what to make of it. You really don't want to see any metal in your oil ever, but we put a really good filter on it. Maybe it's filtering it better. Maybe, they had the wrong size oil filter on the vehicle. It had an undersized filter that they just got to fit, but it wasn't the right filter. They probably used really cheap oil, and maybe something inside this engine was starting to cannibalize itself. But switching to the 111 full synthetic oil, there's been no issues with that. So I don't know the life of this engine, the mileage. The truck has 219, but I don't know if someone put an engine in it at some point. So I'm assuming that this engine does have 219, but it doesn't use any oil that I can see. Once I switch to full synthetic, it's just not burning any oil. So there's no blue smoke or anything, and I guess I really need to put a couple of hundred miles on it to really know. But it's hard to say what the condition of this motor really is. There does seem to be a little bit of timing chain noise. It has helped a little bit with startup. We'll go ahead and start it up too, because it has not been started today. But before we do that, let's take a look underneath the vehicle and see if the rear main is leaking, if the front main seal is leaking, anything like that. Alright, so here we are underneath the vehicle, and looking at the rear main seal, there's nothing coming between the engine and the transmission, not even a drip. So I wonder if this is an original engine or not. It's hard to say, but there's no dripping. The oil pan's still dry. There's no signs of any leaking underneath the vehicle. So full synthetic oil has not caused any issues whatsoever. There's a little drip there on the bolt, but that's probably from me when I changed the oil. But there's no oil coming from between the engine at all. Let's see if we can get a look at the front main. Alright, so here at the front of the vehicle, there is a small stain here, but that is our power steering leak. That only leaks when it's running. So as you see, the leak isn't that big, so it only leaks when it's running. But there's no signs of any oil leaking from the actual front seal. It's hard to see the front seal anyway from this side, but there's no signs that any leaking has started because of using full synthetic oil, which kind of brings up the question, is it a myth? What is the deal with the idea that using full synthetic oil, will cause you to have engine leaks? So here's my theory. I don't believe that in today's world, a modern engine, a 2004 F-150, a 2007 whatever, these engines have changed greatly over the last 15 years. Now, I think if you're going back in time to a time when the seals in the engine weren't synthetic, like 1995, Chevy Tahoe, which used a cork style gasket on the valve covers, that material is bound to leak regardless of what oil you use. So I think that is where the theory comes from. And I just think in today's world it's not true. The seals, the rear mains, they have more of a synthetic component. They're not going to be affected by the oil, the type of oil. When you have reusable gaskets, like the valve cover gaskets on this vehicle, they're reusable. So regardless of the engine developing sludge, and then the synthetic oil is going to come in and clean out the sludge and it's going to start to leak the valve covers. I don't think that is true with a modern engine that uses modern seals. Even though this is a 2004, it's a pretty old vehicle, the technology that went into this engine is pretty advanced. Just the seals, they're all synthetic compounds. The front main seal, the rear main seal, they're a lot better than they were from like 95 going back to some of these engines have some of those engines from the early 90s, mid 90s have a newer design, and some of them were old technology that went way back. So unless it's an engine that's particularly prone to seal failures, I think that synthetic oil only helps because that oil does go to the seals, and it gets to the seals quicker if you use a premium synthetic oil. So I think that it only prolongs the life of the seals. It prevents the idea that you're going to start your car up and it's going to be cold for the first, 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever it is, and you're not going to have oil going to that seal. Seal's going to run dry. I think if you use a synthetic oil, it just is overall better for the engine, regardless of your mileage, whatever. So anyway, comment below and tell me what you think. As you see from this situation that we're in, we're not developing any leaks whatsoever, and I think it has to do with the type of seals used for the particular engine. Now, if you're going to a vehicle built in like 1970, where materials at the time it was a little expensive to use premium synthetic type of seals. They were running cork type of seals and things like that. There's when you're going to have your leaks. Early 90s, after 96, 97, a lot of engines were being redesigned and have some really good components that will more or less not leak, regardless of what kind of oil you use. I don't think synthetic necessarily causes leaks, but just the materials and gaskets will cause the leaks. And then you have myths come out that the synthetic oil caused it to leak, and I don't think that's true. But anyway, let's go ahead and start this vehicle up like I said we do, and see how it sounds with the full synthetic oil after being installed in the engine. Let's see how it starts cold. Alright, so there's a cold start. 219,000 miles, Mobil 1 full synthetic oil. Comment below and tell me what you think. Thanks a lot. Bye.